Are you worried about today's dire financial situation?
Put simply, I would argue the Biden economic plan is working.
The storms on Wall Street continue today after regulators seized the assets of Silicon Valley Bank, marking the largest bank failure since the 2008 financial crisis.
Do you worry you'll have enough to pay your mortgage, pay your children's college tuition, enough to retire?
I believe our banking system remains strong.
Regional banks in focus once again today as the market digests the fallout of the First Republic failure.
You have questions, we have answers. It's the Gold Standard with Ken Russo and Jennifer Horn.
Thank you for joining us on the Gold Standard Radio Show. Ken Russo, Jennifer Horn, and all of you back together again. That's how we like it. And Ken, happy after 4th of July week.
I hope you had a nice Alaskan cruise.
I did, actually. It was very good. I took 400 listeners to Alaska, along with Dr. Sebastian Gorka and Mike Gallagher and Chris DeGaulle and Katie Gorka. And I got to tell you, it does revive your batteries to be surrounded by people who, are good patriots.
Excellent.
I
Sounds
can tell
like
you,
a wonderful time.
They love freedom. Mm-hmm. They love their guns. They love God, and they love gold.
Okay.
For sure.
Well, let's talk about that last part there, and we could give the folks listening today some very important information. Maybe that give them something to think about.
Exactly. Something to think about. And, we always have a title for the episode, and you have the collapse of FERN. And I thought, oh, great. I kill ferns all the time. Did we do it again? But we're going to talk about what happened to our money, basically. We're going to look in the mirror and go, what in the world did happen to our dollar? What happened to the Federal Reserve? What happened to our economic situation, Ken?
Yeah, and what is happening?
Yeah.
Where are we headed from here? In FERN, Federal Reserve note. Mm-hmm. And if anybody takes a dollar bill out of their pocket or whatever and look at it, it says it right on their Federal Reserve note.
What happened?
Well, Federal Reserve Bank is the, central bank of the United States. And as crazy as this sounds, we give the Federal Reserve Bank permission to print money. We borrow that money, and we pay interest on it.
That sounds really stupid.
Does that sound like a system that is strong or, going to survive to you?
No.
So what I would say to people today is what they see with pricing, inflation, the dollar losing value, this has kind of been building up for a long time. And the question is are we headed for a collapse of our dollar, the Federal Reserve note?
Right.
And for most people that want to own gold or that want to protect themselves, they feel that way. They feel that the monetary system itself is very shaky. They feel that the banking system is leveraged and just another crisis like commercial real estate is right around the corner. Mm-hmm. The government is spending way, way too much money. They have a debt problem, a serious debt problem. And how is this going to affect each and every person out there? And my contention is that it will affect and is affecting you to this day because our money is buying less. Mm-hmm. Things are becoming inflated. The housing situation is pretty much unaffordable for certain parts of the country. But people aren't really that afraid for some reason of the debt situation. And you mentioned this to me just a few minutes ago, that you saw the debate, week and a half, 2 weeks ago, right? And
unfortunately, yes, I did.
We all saw it.
Right.
Neither candidate mentioned the debt problem that our country and actually the world is facing. Mm-hmm. Neither candidate even talked about our biggest, person of U.S. debt is Japan. Mm-hmm. Their currency's crashing. Nobody talked about how is that going to affect the everyday American. Yeah. Are we going to be able to cut spending? What's going to happen to Social Security funds by, the early 2030s? What's going to happen to, Medi-Cal, Medicaid?
Things people rely on.
Yeah, veterans benefits, obligations that we have to pay. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing to me that all of this is just based on printing of more money out of thin air it's based on a currency that's backed by nothing, and it's based on enormous debt, corporate debt, consumer debt, government debt, that's just going to go exponentially higher from where we are today. And what is that ultimately going to mean? And I actually think we're seeing it in real time, the collapse of FERN, the Federal Reserve note. And I think that we're seeing a collapse of the entire monetary system literally in front of our eyes. And this could happen literally by the end of the year.
Yeah.
I think it's building up to that, Jen. We're seeing stuff that's happening now politically. We're seeing certain people being blamed for certain things. The truth will obviously come out. And I do think that our money, our dollar, our Federal Reserve note, FERN, is in serious, serious trouble.
And don't forget how manipulated our money is right now, right? So we all know that there is manipulation, whether it's with the stock market, whatever it is, there is manipulation. Interest rates, all of that. You don't think for a second, if a certain candidate gets elected, that there's not going to be some kind of funny business, that maybe whatever's been holding up and propping up this system might snap? I mean, it's possible.
Absolutely. I
Right?
think it's inevitably. I mean, we haven't mentioned a possible cyber attack. We haven't mentioned possible assassination attempts. We haven't mentioned other candidates that may show up, but we all know who's kind of running things behind the scenes. I mean, Joe Biden is not calling the shots. So what's going to happen when it comes to candidates? What's going to happen when it comes to policy? And it's just amazing to me that no one is really talking about the serious debt problem.
The what ifs. And you have to be ready for that. And that's why we talk about gold and precious metals, because that's something tangible. You hold at home. So if there's a cyber attack, you don't have to wait for the power to go back on. You don't have to wait for the computers to go back up. You're actually holding on to something that can help you in a really bad situation, in an emergency. But you're also got that hedge against inflation, which is really important. And look, we're talking about one avenue where things get really bad and there's an entire collapse. But don't forget that there is a whole other avenue where people are saying, you know what, I'm not going to panic about the economy because it is an election year and maybe my guy's going to win. And if your guy wins, don't think for a second that your guy, our guy maybe, could even fix things in the way that the system is so broken. It's impossible to imagine that just one person is going to be able to fix this. And that's why it's so important, no matter where your heart lies when it comes to politics, that you are protecting yourself. I mean, I told you today, the RNC released a whole list this week of platform points, 20 things that they're going to work on for 2024. And as I was reading through it on the radio show I host in Los Angeles, one of our listeners called in and said, there is not one item that deals with the debt. And that's because Republicans and Democrats both alike have a spending problem, and they don't really know how to dig out of the problem that we're in.
Well, the whole system,
or they don't want to.
It's addicted to debt, Jen. I mean, it's gotten that big. In 1971, we talk about it all the time. We went off the gold standard where our gold dollar became a credit dollar.
Whose idea was that again?
Richard Nixon.
We didn't bring him in yet.
Full fiat, bring it on. But full fiat.
Yeah.
Full fiat. So our money's backed by nothing except all of this crazy debt, enormous debt, leverage, derivatives. So you have to ask yourself, I mean, whoever steps into this problem, I mean, are those same situations going to be there? Of course they are. Of course we could have a little window of respite, or, of course we can do a better job with the borders, and of course we can do a better job with the economy and energy and all of the regulation and taxes. I mean, there's even talk that President Trump may want to end the central banking system.
Right. And
maybe have a currency and a monetary system where gold and silver play a larger role like these other countries are doing. We should see another currency probably by the BRIC nations towards the end of the year when they meet, and that will be backed by tangible assets. A lot of the world is moving away from FERN, from the Federal Reserve note, which is the world reserve currency, because they see how toxic our debt is. They see how toxic the situation is in our dollar. Don't forget, we used to be able to export a lot of our inflation to other countries, Jen. and they would take our dollars and they would send back appliances and cell phones and refrigerators and, that sort of thing, cars. A lot of that has changed. The interest rate environment is going up. A lot of these other countries now have realized that they don't want to hold on to all these dollars. Mm-hmm. They don't want to invest in the United States debt anymore to the degree that they used to. And a lot of these central banks of the world are replacing these debt instruments, these paper instruments, with gold. And that's one of the reasons why gold is up about almost 20%, year to date. Silver is up like almost 50% over the last 6 months, because there's a movement of people saying, how could I diversify some of these worthless paper assets while I can? How could I put it into something that I know is a store of value, something that has historically stood the test of time, that's money, something that's private, and something that, God forbid, when we have this digital system that, is eventually going to happen, something that I could have purchasing power outside of that system. So I would encourage every single person who's listening to this, or every single American right now, if you have some cash at the bank, or if you have an IRA, or if you have an old 401k, and you don't feel comfortable with those assets right now, being in such a risky paper environment that's drowning in debt, gold and silver should be something that you consider at this particular time.
And the price should not scare you, because it really follows the inflation of our dollar, right?
Well, the dollar has so much more to fall. You know what I mean? So the price of gold and the price of silver will eventually reflect that at a much higher price. So I wouldn't be surprised to see gold go up by 5 or 10 times, and silver as well over the next few years, because there's going to be so much damage to our lovely FERN, the Federal Reserve note.
It's a sad, dying FERN. We don't like that. We don't like that. But I'll tell you what, there are things that you can do to protect yourself. And you can do that by adding gold, silver, precious metals to your investment portfolio. Find out your best options at Midas Gold Group. 855-322-4653. 855-322-GOLD to get more information. 855-322-GOLD. GOLD. Pretty simple. Or always MidasGoldGroup.com, MidasGoldGroup.com to get more information, find out what products are available. Now, there is a whole lot more up ahead. Ken Russo, Jennifer Horn, it's a Gold Standard Radio Show.
Dr. Gorka here. You're listening to The Gold Standard with your hosts, Ken Russo from veteran-owned Midas Gold Group and Jennifer Horn. Owning private money in the form of physical gold and silver is perhaps more important than ever to your long-term financial security. As U.S. banks fail, the Biden administration sends hundreds of billions abroad while depleting our strategic oil reserves. However, the biggest financial threat may be coming from within: central bank digital currency. The patents have been filed and the big banks have released plans for implementation. Midas Gold Group sees tyrannical implications, the end of cash, the end of financial privacy, big government able to see your every purchase. Could there be ties to social credit? Hear more commentary on the political and economic issues that affect your financial security right here on the Gold Standard. You can create your own Gold Standard with a call to Midas Gold Group, 855-322-GOLD. That's 855-322-4653, MidasGoldGroup.com.
Welcome back. It is a Gold Standard Radio Show. Ken Russo and Jennifer Horn, thanks for being with us today. And before we jump back into it, Ken, you referenced I took a little trip last week. I was in the beautiful state of Alaska, which, by the way, if you have not been, you got to add that to your bucket list. It's incredible. And in one of the cities, this was a gold mining area, a lot of fishermen, a lot of people. This was, this is the wild, what do they call it? It's not the Wild West, is it? It's wild. The wild frontier.
Alaska.
Wild
yeah,
frontier.
The wild frontier. Yeah.
And so we took a little tour in Ketchikan to Creek Street, which maybe some of you have gone to before. And it's a whole little row of, let's say we're working women.
The ladies of the night.
The ladies of the night made their living with the fishermen and the gold miners. And so we went through one of the museums.
Still?
Yeah, not today. It's
okay.
not
All right.
operating. Do not start rumors on that.
Okay.
This is a museum. Ken,
Oh,
a
okay.
museum.
All right.
And so we walk in, and I was with my dad. My dad whips out a credit card to pay for us to get into the museum, and she says, "Oh no, sir, we only take cash or gold." And I thought, dang. And me, I'm here without Ken Russo. He would have had
that's
some
how it
gold
used
for
to
me.
be, Jen.
I know.
Not to mention that credit card would leave a trace if you were, doing something behind your spouse's back that you wouldn't, weren't
Gold is
supposed to
the
be.
ultimate in privacy. No digital
Yeah.
footprint.
Well,
We
that's
like
right.
that.
Yeah, and for people that are kind of new to the show or whatever, Jen, it's important. Why don't we kind of go over some of the basics?
Let's go over the basics because we're in a pretty terrible situation, and gold and silver are protective. So let's start. This is like Gold 101 with Ken
basic
Russo.
stuff. As easy as we could, scrunch 100+ years into whatever, right?
10 minutes. Perfect.
So our money used to be on a gold standard.
That's right.
Meaning that every dollar was backed by a certain amount of gold.
Mm-hmm.
And the Federal Reserve Bank was formed in 1913.
I think this is important to underscore because I think a lot of people think that the Federal Reserve is somehow our government. It is not.
No, private corporation, not federal.
Made up of
no
the wealthiest.
reserves, not even a bank, but they're the central bank of the United States. So
Right.
they control monetary policy and interest rates and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1930s, coming after the Great Depression, the government wanted to stimulate the economy. And, of course, they had the brilliant idea that the politicians and the bankers could do a better job of that rather than just the free market.
Things haven't changed.
So what they did was they took away in 1933, by executive order, the ability of the United States citizens to own gold, and they stripped the United States dollar of its backing of gold to a degree. Okay? To foreigners, gold was still part of the dollar, but to Americans, not anymore, but it continued to dwindle, that percentage of gold that backed every dollar. So we go through the 40s, and we have, World War II, and we have Vietnam, different wars. I think there's, probably tens, if not hundreds, of conflicts during that time, for sure. And there's historians out there that would better know the answer to that than I would. But we come to the late 60s and early 70s where foreigners were still allowed to convert their dollars into gold. And the stockpile of the United States of gold was dwindling. So the United States at that time made a decision in 1971 to take the gold standard completely off of the dollar.
Okay.
So the dollar in 1971 became full fiat, meaning that it's not backed by anything.
No convertibility, really.
No.
Right?
I mean, just before, you used to be able to go to the, or even up to that time, if you were a foreigner, you can convert your paper dollars into gold. Back in the 30s, you could have brought a $20 bill to the bank, and they would have even given you a $20 gold piece. So once we become full fiat, the government then had the ability to take out as much debt as they want.
And go
pretty
wild
much,
they did.
and spend as much money as they wanted. And
Right.
it's slowly, trillion here, trillion there, 10 trillion here. Now we're approaching, hundreds of trillions of dollars at a time. The 35 trillion that we see in debt is only a portion of what is really there. There's a lot of unfunded liabilities and stuff. The debt situation is actually even a lot worse than that. But we also saw a way for these organizations to start, Department of this in 1971, Department of this, section this, and all of this is just different ways to spend money.
And this is truly something people don't realize. In the 70s, that's when all of these departments, Department of Education came up under Carter. It was the 70s and 80s, early 80s, when they said, you know what, let's grow government, lots of departments. And that's, as you mentioned, a trick so that they could launder some money to themselves, make themselves
Basically,
rich.
yeah. I mean, build big government, right?
Yeah.
Government overreach. And not to mention then war, as always, is another.
It's profitable.
And that will never go away. That's another reason why the public right now is not so, happy with President Trump because it sounds to me like he wants peace. He doesn't want war. But that's bad for business.
Yeah, doesn't make money.
That's right. So we'll see where that goes. But all of these reasons have just been supported pretty much by debt. Not 100%, obviously, but a good portion of it. So the question is are we seeing now a collapse of that system? Because the weight of the debt globally and here in the United States is just becoming so massive.
Right.
Are we seeing a potential collapse? Now, as that happens, are there going to be other events that lead up to it?
What
my
kind
contention,
of events? When you say that, what do you mean?
Well, it could be a false flag event. It could be a assassination attempt. It could be a cyber attack. Could be war.
Yep.
It could be something like that.
Another pandemic.
So it could be. That's right. Another pandemic. Bird flu, I guess, is the new popular one that's potentially coming.
Yeah.
I'm
going to hold off on the bird flu.
But it's inevitable because the system, FERN, is dying. So how could they keep this dying dollar revived?
Yeah.
What excuse is going to come up for us to print more money? Is it aliens? Is it the green new scam? That's is it what?
I believe it's deal, Ken.
Pandemic, which was another reason to print tens of trillions of globally hundreds of trillions of dollars. So what's going to happen to kind of keep this dying system that's on life support going? Because they have to print more money, blah, 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 and do that. It's inevitable.
It's also inevitable that you can't just keep printing money without huge ramifications, though.
So if you keep printing all of these dollars out of thin air and you keep taking out of all this debt, what do you think, number one, is going to happen to the safety and the security of the present system? And what is going to happen to the value of that dollar that you're holding on to as they continue to print it into oblivion? Well, it's going to be worth a lot less from now. That's why $1 in 1913 is now probably worth about 3 or 4 cents. So that's going to continue. The question is if we do reach some sort of a collapse, what are you going to be left with? How much of your money is still going to be tied up to that system that just collapsed? How much of your money is still in the bank where that banking system just collapsed?
Right.
How much of your money is in government bonds and that government just collapsed? So my contention is that every single person who has any type of a nest egg, any type of assets worth protecting, should strongly be considering right now and thinking about, if the system collapsed, what's going to happen to my money if I have it all connected to a system that's dying? And that's where the gold and silver come into play, Jeff.
And this is where we kind of talk about buckets, too, because this is not about making a ton of money off of gold and silver, although we do see gold and silver going up in value over time. But what this is about protecting the money you have already earned. This is about wealth preservation. It's also about privacy. It's also really protecting yourself against really the worst case scenario, right?
And it could happen. Now,
That's right.
If it doesn't, let's say that the system stays together and we get a new president and fantastic, we all know our money's still going to lose value.
Right.
It's just going to buy a lot less in the future, okay? So maybe things will become a lot more inflated. Maybe maybe like Weimar Republic inflated. Who knows? We've seen this before. Maybe Argentina inflated. We'll see. But the point is that you don't have to have all of your money in that kind of a system.
That's right. And you can protect yourself. You can gain that financial freedom away from the system, something separate, something tangible, something you can hold on to, and make sure that you keep your legacy for your family. You get a little more control with gold and precious metals. 855-322-4653, 855-322-GOLD. That's from Midas Gold Group, 855-322-GOLD, or go online, MidasGoldGroup.com, MidasGoldGroup.com. You can go see them, Thousand Oaks, California, Phoenix, Arizona, MidasGoldGroup.com, 855-322-GOLD. Ken Russo, always great to see you.
Great to see you.
Thanks for joining us. It's the Gold Standard Radio Show with Ken Russo and Jennifer Horn.